years ago, most IT organisations still hosted the majority of data centre requirements internally, running operations entirely through in-house servers. But times are changing. The rising popularity of cloud and virtualisation means the outsourcing of data hosting and network infrastructure is becoming an attractive proposition for many organisations. Computing estimates suggest that around 30% of IT companies will be outsourcing data centres by 2017. Nevertheless, there are currently pros and cons to staying in-house or outsourcing, depending on very specific use cases, as well as the ebb and flow of enterprise IT trends. Consulting one organisation who's staying in-house, one who's going out, and a couple of industry experts, I set out to investigate the current state of play across the field. I'm here at Birmingham City University, where they've just installed a brand new on-site data centre to serve their 23,500 students. I'm wondering why, with outsourced data centres and cloud solutions dropping in cost but rising in efficiency, BCU has decided to stay on site for the time being. Sean Buffery is Associate Director of Converged Infrastructure at Birmingham City University and has just overseen the installation of a brand new data centre to handle campus-wide data storage and networks. So Sean, could you begin by just giving me a little bit of background to this new in-house data centre solution?
Yep, we use the European tendering process, published out to the European Journal. It's taken about 3 years to get to where we are now. Requirements, discussions with providers to define what we actually needed, award the tender and deliver the facilities that we've got now. We're in a really good position for a university. We're far beyond what we had before. It's a top-notch facility we've got, and it's good to start seeing services delivered from it and reaping the benefits.
Could you tell me why you chose to keep your data centre in-house?
I think the project started off considering in-house. The university perhaps wasn't ready to move out to the cloud, hadn't got all its procedures in place to consider what we needed to do to that. Plus the resilience that an on-premise data centre brings to us. We operate 2 data centres which run in an active situation, so one fails, the other one will take over and provide service still to the users on sites. So that was the primary reason why we stayed on-premise.
So what did you feel would be the drawbacks of outsourcing for Birmingham City University at this moment in time?
I think our main concern and advantage that we bring keeping it on-premise is security of data. If you take that out into the cloud, you've got to consider things, where is your data going, where is it stored, European harbour, safe harbour and stuff like that. But also something that probably people normally forget is an exit strategy as well. Pulling the data away from that provider and moving it to someone else. You can shop around for providers, but your data might be locked into somewhere or very difficult or very costly to pull out. By keeping it on premise, we control the security of our data, both physically and electronically as a media.
Okay, so you've obviously kept this solution quite sort of open-ended and agile. If you were looking at outsourcing in the future, what sort of directions might you take that?
So if we were going to put it out to the cloud at some point, we'd look at something that's connected to Janet, the infrastructure that HEs use within the UK. We know the resilience and the reliability of that service. If a provider is connected to Janet, I think it's a distinct advantage to the HE environment that we would benefit from that reliability as well. Things like latency across the network would then be less of a consideration. But as we stand at the moment, that's probably where we'd be.
So this is Birmingham City University's individual use case for keeping its data on premise, but how does the wider industry currently feel about staying in-house? Here's Computing Research's Danny Palmer to help build up that picture.
We asked a cross-section of IT managers their main reasons for keeping services in-house compared with outsourcing them. Almost half told Computing that a top advantage of retaining software and applications in-house was that they have better control over the data centre, avoiding the need to go to a third party in order to make alterations. On a similar note, just over a third said that a reassuring factor when using in-house services was clear ownership of data, with no confusion as to who has full responsibility for it. They felt this could be a different story if outsourcing to a cloud-based service provider. A further third suggested that a major advantage of keeping services in-house was that it allowed them to retain internal knowledge and expertise rather than needing to depend on external help if and when something goes wrong. Security was also seen as a key advantage of keeping services in-house, with organisations more reassured that their data is safe when in the server room within their own building, rather than being with an external solutions provider, which could be anywhere else on the globe.
Better control over data, retaining internal knowledge, and perhaps just general peace of mind may be some of the major drivers for the on-premise argument. But nevertheless, that positive 30% of outsourcing by 2017 must have a good reason. I travelled to Swindon to meet with financial consulting company Openwork. There, technical architect Chris Yao oversees the company's complete outsourcing of its data services to Rackspace, hosted in a data centre many miles away. Yao tells me that, in an age of affordable, high-speed and 24/7 connection, he expects remote access to his firm's data as easily as turning on a tap. Chris, could you tell me why Openwork particularly decided to begin outsourcing its data?
There's three key points for me and why we chose to outsource our data. The first thing was the commercial model that works for us. Secondly, it's the ability to scale our resources or scale them down as and when the company demands. Thirdly, it's the access to the skill sets that an outsource provider provides us with, require me not to have retain those internally. On the commercial side of things, it's allowed us to leverage basically a model that suits us. So it's split into tiers. We've got Gold, which is the fast premium rate storage. We've got the medium, which is the slower storage, and we've got the archive storage, which is bronze. These obviously come at different price points, depending on what our applications and what service we need to deliver. Ultimately, our SLAs to our clients will depend on how we design, architect, and deliver the storage to those applications and our clients. From a resource perspective, it allows us to contract and expand our data as and when we need to, without having to go out and purchase another disk tray, for example. Outsourcing, there's agreements in place, we have SLAs, they're very important. You need to have the expectation set with both the provider and yourself, that how quickly you can deliver additional storage, but also on the opposite side of the scale is also contracting your storage. Obviously that leads to commercial benefits, contracting, obviously reducing your ongoing costs, but also expanding. It allows you to be able to react to the business need within your agreed timescales. Typically, an outsource provider will have a mass scale of storage available to them much quicker than I would say you and I could go to the manufacturer and provision the storage required to deliver your services. From a skill set perspective, outsourcing gives me access to operational skills, design skills. It's not a skill set that I will need on a day-to-day basis. Operationally, yes, but I treat it as a utility. So from my perspective, it's the outsource provider to make sure that my storage is online 24/7 as agreed. From a design perspective, having that specialist skill set is obviously a premium to Openwork. Now, it's not something that I would need on an ongoing basis, so having that as a managed service allows me to leverage those resources, pull them into the team as and when I need them, and then obviously release them, and not having the expense and maintenance of that ongoing.
Many businesses, when they're considering the kind of pros and cons between staying in-house or outsourcing their data, will often cite the geographical distance between them and the data centre as a factor. I just wondered how important that is to Openwork.
From a distance perspective, it really depends on the client base that you're serving. Now, for Openwork, for us, our clients are primarily nationwide around the UK, which is great. So really you'd want your data to be closest to where your primary set of clients are. Now, we do have our head office staff, but due to the power of the internet, the power of the WAN connections, the data connections available to us now, it allows us to plug in to our data, our outsourced data, quickly when we need to, but also leveraging now the ever-improving internet connections, especially with home connections getting a lot quicker, broadband connections becoming a lot more commercially viable for the faster speeds. It's definitely not really something that we think about of it causing us an issue anymore.
So as a company operating in the financial services sector, I imagine security is paramount. Could you tell me what sort of factors come into consideration when outsourcing?
Due to the data that we hold with our managed service provider, security very important to us. There's two key factors that we needed to consider. Our internal compliance requirements, our external regulatory requirements. Also very much important is having the correct controls in place. So whatever controls drive your organisation, ensure that the managed service provider abides to those and they're audited on a regular basis. That will guarantee that your data is safe.
Computing Research asked 260 IT professionals to suggest the main advantages of outsourced data centre services compared with keeping them in-house. Almost half said outsourcing services resulted in less capital expenditure, providing the company with the benefit of a reduction in outgoing costs. 1/3 indicated that one of the main advantages of outsourcing services was that it offered support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, enabling monitoring and upkeep of applications even outside of working hours. This could save the IT department from working late making alterations which couldn't be done without obstructing employees during the working day. Flexibility and scalability were seen as top advantages by around a quarter of respondents, allowing organisations to deploy outsourced applications if and when needed, a tactic which also results in cost saving in some instances.
An approach to cloud and remote computing that may tip the balance further for the case for outsourcing is software-defined networking. Abstracting lower-level functionality in network services via virtual machines, champions of SDN believe that this approach can simplify computer networking techniques. Nick Williams, Senior Product Manager for Data Centres at data and storage firm Brocade, considers the extent to which SDN is seeing adoption in the wider industry.
Well, SDN as a technology is continuing to evolve and will do so over the coming years. So we're very much at the early stages of SDN as a framework of technologies. So we do have a number of use cases already that we've seen adopted for SDN, particularly around the areas of programmatic control and orchestration. Programmatic control in particular is an area that we've seen adoption for service chaining, dynamic services insertion, but also traffic engineering. So I think for organisations to deploy SDN, there maybe needs to be further development in the technology and an evolution of the technology. But at Brocade, we've already seen adoption of OpenFlow, for example, for programmatic control in a network in the US, in a large-scale network for a research and education wide area network, where we're using programmatic control for traffic engineering and redirecting traffic flows in real time through the network into areas which are less utilised. So really it's for efficiency gains through traffic engineering is a good example use case.
While it sounds like SDN still has a way to go, and as such may not be a directly contributing factor to enterprise decision making right now, outsourcing still seems to have a whole lot of reasons to follow that positive metric of 30% adoption by 2017. Birmingham City University clearly values easy access and the relative security of data on the doorstep, while Openwork is happy to trust in a third party to cover its access and security needs. There is no right or wrong answer here. It could be argued that the difference between the need to physically access data versus an on-tap mentality is based on psychology more than technology, but then we live in testing times. With governments still accused of helping themselves to private data, firms cannot be blamed for putting up the shutters. But money still talks, so at the same time, as companies such as Rackspace and Brocade continue to prove their credentials to secure and manage data while cutting costs, outsourcing has never felt a more financially sweet a deal.